Try something before this goes any further. Close your right nostril with a finger. Breathe in through the left. Now switch and breathe in through the right. One of them was easier. Not dramatically, nothing you'd notice on an ordinary day. But one side moved more air than the other, and if you check again in a couple of hours, there's a good chance the easier side will have swapped. You don't have a cold. Nothing is wrong with your nose. What you just felt is a rhythm running quietly in your skull since the day you were born, and almost nobody is told it exists. Though you have, in fact, noticed it before, think back to the last time you had a heavy cold lying in bed, one nostril completely blocked. Then, an hour or two later, that side cleared and the other one closed up instead. Most people file that away as the illness moving around. It isn't. That's the ordinary cycle, still running on schedule, made briefly visible because inflammation exaggerated it into something you couldn't ignore. The German physician Richard Kayser described it in 1895. He noticed that in most healthy people, the two nostrils don't share the work of breathing equally. One dominates. Then sometime later the other takes over, and the pattern repeats on and on through the entire day and night. Rhinologists call it the nasal cycle. The mechanism behind it surprises most people who hear it for the first time. The inside of your nose contains erectile tissue. That's the actual anatomical classification, not a loose comparison. It's the same category of tissue found in the genitals, capable of swelling with blood and then shrinking back down. In the nose, that tissue lines structures called turbinates, and it does exactly what erectile tissue does. One side engorges, narrowing the passage. The other drains, opening it. Your body is running a slow, continuous shift change between two nostrils, and the whole thing happens beneath conscious notice. Why would a body bother doing this? The leading explanation is unglamorous and rather elegant. Your nasal passages do real work, warming incoming air, humidifying it, filtering particles out of it with a carpet of tiny beating hairs that sweep mucus steadily toward the throat. That work is wearing. Tissue that handles the full volume of every breath all day, every day, dries out and degrades. So the body appears to alternate. One side takes the load while the other rests, recovers its moisture, and clears itself out. Then they trade. A shift rota, in other words, running inside your face, for the sake of tissue maintenance, nobody ever asked you to schedule. How long does one shift last? This is where the popular version of the story tends to get tidier than the research. You'll often hear 90 minutes quoted as a clean figure. The literature is messier. Measured properly, the cycle runs anywhere from about 60 minutes to 4 hours, varies substantially between individuals, and isn't perfectly regular even within the same person. Some people don't show a clear cycle at all. 90 minutes is a rough average dressed up as a law, but the interesting question was never the timing. The interesting question is what happens to patients who can no longer breathe through their nose at all. After a total laryngectomy, air no longer moves through the nasal passages the way it once did. If the nasal cycle were simply a mechanical response to airflow, it should stop. It doesn't. The swelling and draining continue on schedule, in a nose that isn't doing the breathing anymore. Sit with what that implies. This rhythm isn't produced by the air. Something upstream is driving it, on a timer. Whether or not you're using the equipment, that upstream driver is the autonomic nervous system, the branch that runs everything you don't consciously operate. Heart rate, digestion, pupil size, blood vessel width. And the moment researchers started asking what else in the body runs on a similar cycle, the picture got considerably stranger. In 1979, Klein and Armitage published a study that had nothing to do with noses. They had participants perform two types of task, verbal and spatial, repeatedly every 15 minutes across 8 hours. What emerged was a rhythm. Performance on the verbal task rose and fell in a cycle roughly 90 to 100 minutes long. Performance on the spatial task followed the same cycle, but inverted. When one peaked, the other dipped. Your capacity for different kinds of thinking, it appeared, was not constant across a day. It oscillated. Two rhythms discovered independently, running at approximately the same tempo. One in the nose, one in cognition. A researcher named David Shanahoff-Kalsa, working with Deborah Wernz and the neurophysiologist Roger Bickford, spent the 1980s trying to connect them. Their 1983 paper in the journal Human Neurobiology proposed that alternating nasal dominance corresponded with alternating activity between the two cerebral hemispheres. In 1987, in the same journal, they went further. Using EEG recordings, they reported that deliberately forcing a person to breathe through one nostril produced relatively greater electrical activity in the opposite hemisphere of the brain. Left nostril, right hemisphere. Right nostril, left hemisphere. Contralateral, which is simply the anatomical word for crossed over. If that's true, it's remarkable. A person could, in theory, shift the balance of their own brain activity by plugging one side of their nose. Now, and this is the part where a channel like this one has to be careful. Hold that finding loosely for a moment. We'll come back to how well it has held up, because there's an older document that reads like it was written by someone who already knew. The Shiva Swarodaya is a Sanskrit tantric text, structured as a dialogue between Shiva and Parvati, devoted almost entirely to the breath and its alternation between the nostrils. The tradition built around it is called Swara Yoga. Swara meaning, roughly, the flow or sound of the breath. And unlike a great deal of ancient literature on the body, this text is not primarily interested in metaphysics. It's interested in scheduling. The left nostril flow is called Ida, associated in the text with the moon, with coolness, with receptivity. The right is Pingala, associated with the sun, with heat, with activity. And the text gives specific, almost administrative instructions. When the left nostril dominates, the practitioner is advised toward Sumyakarya, gentle, quiet, sustaining activities. When the right dominates, toward Rudrakarya, demanding, effortful, outward work. And on the brief occasions when both nostrils flow equally, a state called Sushumna, the text advises doing nothing worldly at all and sitting down to meditate instead. The instructions get remarkably granular, which swara should be flowing when you begin a journey. Which one favors eating? Which one to check before an important conversation? Entire chapters concern themselves with timing ordinary decisions against the state of the breath, in the same matter-of-fact register a farmer's almanac uses for planting. This was not presented as mysticism to its original readers. It was presented as practical scheduling advice for people who assumed the rhythm was as obvious and as consequential as the weather. Somebody, centuries before Kayser, before EEG, before anyone measured a single ultradian rhythm, noticed the same alternation, tracked it closely enough to time their day around it, and wrote a manual telling other people to do the same. Now let's come back to that 1987 finding, honestly. It has not gone unchallenged. In 1993, a paper appeared in Medical Hypotheses with a title that leaves little ambiguity. It argued that the autonomic effects claimed for forced nostril breathing were, in the author's assessment, an unsupported claim. Reviews since then have been mixed. Some later studies using EEG, near-infrared spectroscopy, and event-related potentials have found effects broadly consistent with the contralateral hypothesis. Others have found little or nothing. A 2016 review in the Journal of Laryngology and Otology asked, more or less directly, whether the link between nasal airflow and brain activity exists at all. So the honest position is uncomfortable and worth stating plainly. The nasal cycle itself is not in dispute. It's textbook rhinology. The idea that switching nostrils reliably swaps your brain into a different mode is a much larger claim, supported by some studies, contested by others, and stated online with far more confidence than the evidence has earned. What survives that scrutiny is still worth your attention. The rhythm is real. It's centrally driven. It correlates with measurable shifts in autonomic state, and there is genuinely suggestive research on the sleep side. A 2018 study found that when the right nostril was the dominant one during sleep, participants showed greater sleep efficiency and more deep, slow-wave sleep than in the alternative condition. Which brings us to the practical part, and to something the old text and the modern research actually agree on. You can change which nostril is dominant, deliberately, and the method is almost absurdly simple. Lie down on one side. Within several minutes, the nostril closest to the mattress will tend to congest, and the upper one will tend to open. Pressure applied under one armpit produces a similar effect on the opposite side, somilekinin, which is very likely why traditional yogic practitioners used a wooden staff called a yoga danda, wedged beneath the arm, for exactly this purpose. They weren't leaning on it because they were tired. So tonight's practice has two parts and neither takes long. First, before you do anything else, check. Close one nostril, inhale, then the other. Notice which side is currently carrying more of the work. That's it. That single act of noticing is the entire foundation of Swara Yoga, and most people have never once performed it deliberately in their lives. Then as you settle into sleep tonight, try lying on your left side for the first several minutes. In most people, this will gradually open the right nostril. According to the sleep research, that's the condition associated with deeper, slow-wave sleep. Though the study was small, so treat this as an experiment you're running on yourself rather than a prescription. If you wake in the night, check again. See whether it's switched. That's the whole practice. No technique to master, nothing to force. Just attention paid to something that has been happening in your face, roughly every 90 minutes or so for your entire life. The Shiva Swarodaya opens with a warning to the reader, in effect, that this knowledge should not be given to someone who won't use it. Whatever the author meant by that, the practical version is simple enough. You now know the rhythm is there. Check again in 2 hours. It will probably have changed sides, and you'll be one of a very small number of people alive who ever bothered to look.